Arizona Wildlife Views, brought to you by the sale of hunting and fishing licenses and the Heritage Fund, lottery dollars working for wildlife. Some projects made possible by the Sportfish and Wildlife Restoration Fund.
Find birds. Let's go.
Welcome to Arizona Wildlife Views. I'm your host, Jim Harkin. We have some wonderful stories for you about wildlife and habitat right here in our great state. Tonight, we'll go south of Tombstone, see some valuable ranch lands that are being saved from development. After that, we'll meet a woman who really can talk to the animals. But first, we're here at this little slice of heaven known as the Upper Verde River Wildlife Area. It's on the headwaters of the Verde River, full of beautiful scenery and wildlife abounds. The Verde River is an essential source of water for communities and wildlife from northern Yavapai County to the Phoenix Valley. Now this valuable resource has received another level of protection as 293 acres along the river's headwaters were recently purchased by the Arizona Game and Fish Department.
We're standing on the headwaters of the Verde River, and it's a pretty special place. It's one of the few places anywhere that I know of where you can actually see the start of a river. And what you can see behind me is actually where the Verde River begins. And it's formed where Granite Creek comes down and meets into what's called Stillman Lake, which is a body of water that's formed, by a sediment dam from Granite Creek.
The Arizona Game and Fish Department began its protection of this area in 1996 when it purchased more than 700 acres just downstream and created the Upper Verde River Wildlife Area. This latest acquisition means that now over 1,000 acres are under protection.
The upper 26 miles of river is basically undeveloped. There's hardly any public access points, and now with the original purchase for our wildlife area here, plus the most recent purchase, now major ownership is either with the Arizona Game and Fish Department for the upper 5-mile stretch, and then the remainder is under the ownership of the National Forest, the Prescott National Forest.
The department was able to acquire the property from owner Betty Wells, who wanted to make sure that this portion of the land her grandfather originally homesteaded could remain undeveloped. In order for the department to use acquisition funds to buy properties like these, there must be a threatened or endangered species within its boundaries.
This is designated critical habitat for the spike dace, which is a small species of native fish. We also have up to 6 other native species that can be found in the river. We're looking at, as an agency, we're talking about managing this specifically for native fish. There's not that many opportunities left. A lot of our bodies of water now have non-native species, which make it very difficult to manage. And so, since this is a contained system, we're looking at the feasibility now of managing this specifically for those native fish species. Stillman Lake, you're looking at behind me, there's a plan on the table right now, and we're looking at actually treating that and using that as a native fish nursery. This whole system is prone to periodic flooding, so what we would do is raise probably round-tailed chub and razorback sucker, and then as the floods come through here, it helps disperse fish down the river system.
Fish aren't the only creatures who benefit from the river. Its constant water supply feeds the trees and shrubs that have created a vital riparian corridor.
And this area is probably the only main river system in the whole central portion of Arizona. And so it's extremely important for a lot of migratory bird species. It's a big stopover point for migratory songbirds. We've been doing a lot of bird surveys in this area, trying to get this designated as an important bird area through Audubon.
The variety of migratory and native birds that thrive here make the Upper Verde a bird watcher's paradise. The wildlife area is open to the public and offers a cool respite from the Arizona heat. Like most places here, with a natural water supply, the Upper Verde gets plenty of visitors, but there is concern that irresponsible use could force the area to be closed.
We allow public access to our wildlife area, including the Upper Verde River Wildlife Area, but we encourage people to come out and be responsible stewards of the property and remove their trash and recreate in a responsible manner.
How the Verde River is treated at its headwaters impacts not only the wildlife area, but all who rely on it downstream.
Well, certainly it is, and we're monitoring water flows. The Arizona Game and Fish Department is currently filing for in-stream flow rights to protect native fish. There's also a base monitoring flow gauge that was put in on our property by the Salt River Project. And we're very interested in maintaining base flows because there are a lot of downstream water rights in the Verde River that provide a lot of municipal water for some of the larger cities, including Phoenix. And so there's vested interest downstream, people that use that water. And so we need to make sure that water remains in the river upstream here, especially in the Upper Verde. Of course, we're interested in protecting all the wildlife, but we're also interested in maintaining an important Arizona resource.
The Verde is a key component of the Colorado River Basin watershed, and it's Arizona's only federal designated wild and scenic river. But its ecosystem is fragile, so hopefully, by protecting the area where the river begins, we'll help protect the rest of it for the future.
There's been a lot of concerns recently with the Verde River. It was named one of the top 10 of America's most endangered rivers in 2006 by American Rivers. And the main reason for that is groundwater pumping. There's been a lot of people moving out into these areas around Prescott Valley, Chino Valley, Prescott, and there's a lot of people moving out into the Big Chino grasslands, which sit immediately over the Big Chino Aquifer, and a lot of groundwater pumping, so there's concern that if that becomes too significant, that it could actually dry up the river, the upper stretch of the river, so it's become a huge concern, and one that we're aware of and hopefully hope to see not happen.
Cattle ranching in Arizona has been around for a long time. Now the Arizona Game and Fish Department is working with ranchers to keep them on their property and in turn keep that property open for wildlife.
Arizona's cattle ranches are working landscapes, visions of the past that may have an uncertain future. The 47 Ranch in Cochise County is a cattle ranch with a rich history. Settled in the 1800s, this portion of southeastern Arizona was prime ranching country, and most of it was owned by just 3 families who had moved here to pursue their dreams of the West.
The people that established this ranch came in what I would consider sort of a second wave, just after the turn of the century. And 3 families actually, ended up owning pretty much everything between Tombstone and Douglas. They were the Stevensons, the Davises, and the Cowans. And the 47 Ranch was a Davis ranch. It was established by a guy named Bill Davis, and he brought the 47 brand with him from Texas, and they were ranching on the other side of the Mule Mountains, I would say around 1905 or thereabouts. And the story that I've heard is that they had relatives come from Texas who were going to stay for a while and sort of moved in with them, and after they'd been there long enough, they just said, well, you guys keep this and we'll go on the other side of the mountains and homestead another place. And so they came over here around 1912, we think. Definitely some history. We're by far and away newcomers to the area.
Dennis and Deborah Maroney may be newcomers here, and while they appreciate the ranch's history, their goal is to preserve it for the future. They understand that the open space on their ranch is more than a picturesque backdrop. The grasslands are vital to maintaining our wildlife habitat and water supplies.
The ranch itself is about 25,000 acres, and then we graze some additional acreage that adjoins the ranch on an agreement with some other owners. So altogether we graze about 34,000 acres. And of that, we have just under 5,000 acres of deeded land, and just under a fifth of that, about 19 point some percent of the land is now under easement. And our goal is hopefully to eventually put most or all of it under easement as much as we can.
The easement Dennis Maroney is referring to is a conservation easement that places nearly 1,000 acres of the 47 Ranch under permanent protection from future development. The Arizona Game and Fish Department's Landowner Relations Program and Arizona Open Land Trust partnered with the Maroneys to make this happen.
It ties back to similar goals from both the department and the landowner. The department is obviously looking at preserving important wildlife habitat areas as well as recreational opportunity, and that was as well the goal of the landowner. He wanted to maintain this operating cattle ranch into perpetuity and preserve these areas for both wildlife and the sustainability of his agricultural operation. He didn't want to see this ranch subdivided in the future and houses kind of put all over it.
I think really there's two or three things that make it attractive for us. The first is that I guess my whole life growing up in Arizona, I've been watching agricultural land be converted to residential home sites and subdivisions, and just seems like we need to try to do as much as we can to keep some of it in open space and wildlife habitat and in productive use. And so one thing that a conservation easement does is it removes that option of subdivision and development from the land forever.
Protecting ranches isn't a fuzzy sentimental notion, but a practical strategy in one of the nation's fastest growing states. Splitting up ranches can impose costs on everyone else. Fragmenting the landscape makes it more difficult for wildlife to survive. Building homes in these rural areas means more wells, contributing to a drop in the water table. 47 Ranch is located in the Hay Mountain watershed, which drains into the Whitewater Draw, southern Arizona's most important waterway east of the San Pedro River.
The particular area that we focused on for this portion of our protection plan is all in a canyon called Abbott Canyon. And Abbott Canyon has two branches, and the upper end of each branch has a spring with live water. All down through the bottom of these canyons, from the spring on downstream, is riparian habitat characterized by willows and baccharis and Arizona walnut, sycamore, you know, a real nice variety of riparian species, and at certain areas where there's some year-round water, even in drought conditions. Then all the north-facing slopes are what we call a juniper oak savanna. We have 5 species of oaks and alligator juniper and an understory of grasses and shrubs that's pretty phenomenal. The south-facing slopes are more what you would consider a desert grassland landscape with ocotillos and agaves, and but still, you know, over 25 species of perennial grasses. So we had a lot of biological diversity to start with.
Wildlife is abundant in these canyons. Everything from white-tailed deer to javelina to black bear and everything in between thrives here. The diversity of habitat and wildlife is one of the main reasons this is such an attractive area for the conservation easement.
For both plant and animal species, this particular region, sort of the northernmost extent of a lot of subtropical species that are more abundant in Mexico, and the southernmost extent of a lot of Rocky Mountain species. And then it's sort of the westernmost extent of Chihuahuan stuff and the easternmost end of Sonoran Desert things. So it's a real interesting biological crossroads.
By allowing the ranchers who know their land to continue to be its steward, you get the best of both worlds.
We run about 400 mother cows, And we also raise registered quarter horses. We've got about 10 mares and a stud. We have about 20, I think 22 pastures on the ranch now, and we try to rotate the cattle through all the pastures in a sequence which moves us into a pasture at least a year after it was previously used, and always in a little different season than it was grazed the prior year. So we're pretty adamant on rest and rotation, and our cattle have gotten used to being moved so much so that when we go to start gathering them, they just line out and start walking because they know they're going to move to fresh feed.
When the Maronis first bought 47 Ranch, it was equipped with a water system that only pumped water into areas of the ranch where the cattle were, leaving the rest of the ranch dry. It didn't take them long to see that was a big problem for the wildlife who also lived there.
We have a number of windmills and a number of pumps, and one of the first things we did was to convert these submersible pumps over to solar and create a situation where water would be available over the entire ranch year-round. And we have game and fish data that shows that our deer herds have increased in number, javelina herds have increased in number, quail, same thing. And I think just because the animals, the wildlife, had the reliability of water. And even, 2003 and 2004, we were in some pretty significant drought. Even into 2005, we still were able to maintain those waters all over the entire ranch.
The Maronis care about this land, and they want to know that it will flourish long after they are gone. The beauty of the conservation easement is that it's tied to the ranch's deed, so no matter who buys the ranch in the future, the land contained in the easement will always be protected.
Part of what our overall goal is to have a working example of agricultural sustainability in an arid or semi-arid environment. And we have for years heard from all the experts and all the scientists and all the critics of ranching that this kind of thing is not sustainable in the Southwest. And yet, we're sitting here today after 150 years of ranching, and this ranch produces a lot of food and consequently feeds a lot of people. And I think that programs like this easement program that we have been able to work out with Game and Fish is going to help us stay here for a long time to come and still be able to produce food while having wildlife habitat that supports these other species. And I think that's really important. And I think it's what makes the whole thing really great.
When it comes to imitating birds, hoo, hoo. As you can tell, I need a little help. But in this segment, we meet a woman who is an absolute natural.
Nicole Peretta is a very sweet, unassuming young lady who likes to blend into the crowd. But be careful, invite her on a birding trip and she may just play with your mind. You see, Nicole is a modern-day Dr. Dolittle. She talks to the birds.
Last I checked up my list, I think I'm up to 146.
That's 146 different calls from 121 species of birds. Definitely something to crow about. While on an outing at the Verde Valley Birding and Nature Festival, she secretly lets out the call of one of her favorites, the laughing kookaburra. Or the kagoo from New Caledonia. With confusion spreading across their faces, fellow birders question each other and frantically glass the trees. Nicole simply smiles to herself, proud of the skills she has developed over her lifetime.
Well, I started as a young child. I was about 6 years old when I did my first bird call. Then I started getting into bird watching when I was 9. So I started a life list of birds when I was 9. then it just, you listen to the birds and you hear them make a noise, and for some reason I was able to imitate them. And my very first experience with birds actually responding to my calls was probably when I was about 11. I learned how to do the common raven, and this is what the raven sounds like for those who like a little reminder. So those are some different sounds that the raven makes. And so I learned that call when I was 11. It took me about a year to learn that call, to get my voice to actually do that. And I was walking home from school one day, and I did that call because I saw a raven across the street, and they answered back. So I kept doing it, but you know how children are, they have to be home at a certain time. So I couldn't just stand there in front of the school and talk to the raven. So I kept on walking. Well, lo and behold, I walked away, and the ravens sounded closer, and I turned around and the ravens were right behind me in a tree. And then I walked more and continued doing the raven call, and they were following me, and they followed me all the way home. So when I got in the door, there were 2 ravens circling over my house. So what better encouragement can you get as a child and say, hey, if I learn these bird calls, they come to me. And that's exactly what some of them do.
And that's the whole idea behind Talking Birdie. Get the birds to come to you, or at least stay a little longer so you can get a better look at them before they go about their business.
Now, when a bird is flying away, like it's just up in the air and it's flying away, that's a good time to call them because you want them to come back. So sometimes I'll see a hawk in the air. So I'll see him flying, and let's say it's a immature, or it's a red-tailed hawk. I'll do an immature red-tailed call, and it's like this. And sometimes that bird will turn right back around because it's like, yeah, who knows where it was heading off to, but it hears this other bird and it goes, okay. And usually they just come around, they change their angle of their soar and they come a little closer. I've done that on many occasions. I was with the intern, and there was an osprey flying way far away. So I did the osprey call. Like that, and he came right over. So he was all the way across the bay, but he heard me doing that, and I did it like several times, several repetitions, and he flew directly over us. And then I stopped once he was over our heads. I didn't want to get him upset, and then he got a good view, and then he flew off.
One thing that makes Nicole special is she mostly uses her voice, her vocal cords, rather than whistling. In fact, only 20 of her 146 calls are whistles. When most people want to imitate a bird, they purse their lips and blow air to whistle, whereas Nicole gathers her body almost like a singer would to prepare her air column and throat for the specific noises she's about to make with her vocal cords. Nicole has learned to vary the different vocalizations a bird will make to her advantage. You can't learn to imitate birds without paying close attention to their behavior. One thing Nicole has observed is that the same bird will make different calls at different times of the year and for different reasons. She uses this knowledge to make the appropriate call, not only for that specific bird, but for the season or situation.
The most common is a contact call, where maybe birds have been separated, and it's just a call that they do to keep in touch. So like our Gambel's quail, they have a contact call, and it goes similar to this. So sometimes you'll hear that, and it might be a lone bird trying to reconnect with the flock, so they'll do that. Now, there's also calls for territory. That's probably the most common thing. Every time you hear a bird singing, it's usually because they're trying to either attract a mate or to tell other males that this is my territory. So that's usually what a song is all about. And the Gambel's quail has a territorial call that sounds like this. Like that. And they're just saying, hey, this is my spot. And they don't want anyone else coming around.
Nicole offers some ethics she follows and would like other bird callers to adopt.
What birders need to know is when they're out there calling birds is to make sure the birds aren't nesting. If they see a bird actually coming out of a nest hole, or if they see them sitting on eggs, it's not a good time to call. I know if I see a bird just sitting there and he's close enough, I usually don't talk to it. I usually don't, because he's already out in the open. I really don't need him to come any closer. He's preening, he's having a good time. I don't want to disturb his day, because when you do a bird call, they think it's another bird in the territory, and you're taking a situation where a bird might be very calm and happy and making him maybe a little upset. There's nothing wrong with bird calling. You just need to know the right times to do it.
Nicole also teaches others how to master talking birdie. While she says calling birds is a skill anyone can learn, it helps to start young.
I think because I started this as a child, I've trained my voice how to do these calls. If you listen to children, they are capable of doing all the sounds that I do. A screaming toddler in the grocery store, we've all heard it. That's the basis of some of my hawk calls. I'm amazed at, when I even watch my own children, what they're capable of vocally. My 2-year-old can do some bird calls. He sees a crow and he goes, ah, 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 like that. And he can do a mourning dove. The mourning dove sounds like this. And my 2-year-old goes,
That's our show for this evening. If you'd like any information about anything you saw, please go to our website at azgfd.gov. On behalf of our producers, Carol Lind and Gary Schaefer, I'm your host, Jim Harkin. We'll see you next time.